So I've been delighted to be able to read this book that we were recommended from the North Idaho Community College. They do a common read. It's called Trying to Get the Whole Campus and Students and Larger Community to Read Certain Books that kind of the faculty and different people have recommended. And this one, I don't know, it goes for a couple years, I think. It's called I Never Thought of It That Way by a journalist, Monica Guzman. And it's been excellent, or the title of it also is How to Have Fearlessly Curious Conversations in Dangerously Divided Times. And it's incredibly appropriate and timely. And it's been really helpful because, I mean, what she talks about is so in line with Buddhism and the Dharma of what we're talking about, of really emphasizing that the key to so much is really recognizing that connecting with others is a huge part of what helps us to have a meaningful life. It's what nourishes us, and it's what creates harmonious societies, and how important it is to recognize that connection, how important it is, and to really stay motivated on wanting to maintain those and cultivate connection with others. And it's as Venerable defined a couple weeks ago at her talk, in talking about this book, she was saying that connection is a kind of a shared experience where you understand something about the other person, and that shared understanding creates a sense of closeness. And I liked kind of that definition, and just recognizing that it's that understanding from each other and having a shared experience that creates that connection. Because, I mean, as we can see in our country on so many levels, disconnection is happening, and we can see the ripple effect of harm that causes. And so I've been, again, motivated to keep coming back to that importance of wanting to stay connected. And one of the things that Monica mentioned in her book is that studies and research has shown that we're not nearly as divided and different as we think we are. We kind of silo ourselves into these different little categories and think the other side is completely different, has completely different values, we have nothing in common. And that's so not correct, that when people get together and talk about things and they create those connections, they realize they have so much more in common than we realize. And I think that's really important to keep recognizing that, again, we have so much more in common than we have differences. And another thing she talks about in this book is assumptions, all the many different assumptions that we make about each other. And I mean, assumptions, they kind of help us in some way of kind of saving energy, of filling in the gaps of things, of like, okay, I think I'm assuming food's gonna be ready, so I don't need to worry about making lunch or something. That's kind of assumption that our minds make all the time, of filling in little gaps of information. But then the problem is when we forget that we've made that guess and we assume that it's true, and then we operate on that basis that information is true, not just a made-up guess. And this kind of goes in line with what Venerable was talking about yesterday with dependent arising, that it's like we make these labels, we assign these names and terms to things, and then go about our lives thinking that that is that thing. But we forget that we've just made the label for it, and then made a judgment and all these other layers of association with something that was kind of made up. And and then that's how we operate our whole lives. And no wonder why we're in samsara and confused and miserable a lot of times, because we're creating these kind of stories and then holding them to be as true. And so, I mean, that question that Venerable states oftentimes, to keep thinking of like, is that true? Is that really true? My assumptions, my judgments, my whatever, is that true? And because so often it's not. A quote Monica said in her book was that certainty kills curiosity, that if you think you know, you won't ask. And that's what creates so much division. If I know that person, they're wearing camo pants and a baseball hat with an American flag on it, I know what they value and what they think. That's so not true. Actually, I had a great example of that yesterday at the protest. There was a guy that was wearing camo pants and some sort of American flag baseball cap that I came up to and started talking to, and he had been in the military for more than 20 years. And somehow, I don't know, we ended up just having a great conversation because I mentioned that I had lived in Ethiopia. And he actually left and then came back and was like, "What were you doing in Ethiopia?" And I said I was in the Peace Corps. And our conversation turned into a beautiful thing of just recognizing we both served our country in different ways, trying to create peace. And that I said that to him, and he kind of paused and was like, that's right." And so that was a beautiful way of breaking down those assumptions. Like I, yeah, had a beautiful connection and conversation with this gentleman. And yeah, so it's, if we think that I'm right and I'm not going to ask, then we lose out on so much. And just the other day, I've been chewing on something about this that it's kind of hard to admit and accept in myself, but I saw that when I think I'm right, most often I think I'm better than the other person. There's kind of that undertone of I'm right, therefore I'm better. And it's really gross to admit that, but it's there. I've been watching this, kind of testing it out since I had that little thought, and I'm like, wow, it's there a lot more than I would like to admit. Um, but I guess it's helpful to see that and to challenge that and to be like, okay, I mean, what Venerable says, do I want to be right or do I want to be happy? And I definitely want to be happy more than being right, because a lot of times I'm not right. And so to keep breaking down that, yeah, trying to be better, trying to be right, and seeing that connecting is so much more important, and understanding each other and trying to open up that dialogue for that creative exchange that we value so much. And it's, I mean, I think that's part of what we're trying to break down, is that self-grasping ignorance, that the ego or the self-centered attitude that is trying to establish itself and make itself solid, wanting to control, make things stable, predictable, secure, something to hold on to. And that's not how things are. Pema Chodron uses the word that fundamental ambiguity, that's what we live in. We live in a state of fundamental ambiguity, that we don't know what's going to happen in the next moment. We don't, there's so many changes, there's so much uncertainty, that, but the ego hates that. Self-centered thought hates that ambiguity. It's trying to control and put things in boxes. And I mean, again, that's why we're miserable. We're fighting reality. Uh, Again, Monica in her book says, asks the reader, are you willing to believe that you are wrong about something? And to really see like, oh, okay, especially in having dialogues with people with different opinions, and realizing, oh, I had that assumption about someone. Can I admit that I was completely wrong about that judgment or assumption? And that when we value the truth more than our own opinions, that's what can bring people together in such a much more harmonious way. And another thing I thought was fun in this book was talking about the beauty of when we have connections with other people and when we really learn from each other. And I guess a researcher kind of came up with the term cerebrations, that it's like when our cerebral mind is connecting with others and learning and things, then that's a cause for celebration. That we have this happy feeling when we're, I know it's kind of corny, I guess, but I like words. So it's again, emphasize, like noticing and celebrating how good it feels to have those connections with people when we break down those barriers and learn from each other. That's a cause for celebration, which I think we had lots of that yesterday going to the Newport protest and many different things, of just seeing the diversity of the signs. And it was a very harmonious and people coming together and having a lot of fun. And yeah, like I said, I had a lot of fun sharing that different perspective with the veteran and connecting with each other. On kind of a connected but slightly off topic aspect, I mean, I've talked about this before, one of my favorite practices is to just sit and imagine the Buddha looking at me with complete acceptance, love, and compassion. And just really how incredibly healing that is, to imagine being looked at by a being with acceptance. And I think, I mean, the more I can do that, imagine the Buddha doing that to me, the more it makes me want to be able to do that to others. So if I could really engage in a conversation with someone and look at them with complete acceptance, not judgment, none of my assumptions or trying to prove that I'm right, that would be so healing and nourishing for both of us. And I know I've experienced that as far as for a while we were doing the empathy circle, as far as listening to each other, where you just sit and listen to another person without interrupting, giving them feedback, anything. You're just mirroring back what they're saying. And that was incredibly healing. I think kind of for the first time, I was like, wow, I actually feel heard, like on a very deep level. And again, so it's like, can I offer that gift to others of really deeply seeing them for who they are and listening to them for what they're saying, rather than trying to assert my agenda? And I mean, that reminds me of the quote that I love and often use from Krishnamurti of, to observe without evaluating is the highest form of human intelligence. And I think that it's like, can I just observe and almost be curious about this other person, to want to learn more about them? That's the highest form of intelligence, not saying, I already know everything about you and I know everything. That's not intelligence at all. So I don't know, I'm just inspired with this book and wanting to continue to lean in with curiosity and understand people, because I don't know, yeah, a lot about what other people think and their views, and I want to learn different perspectives and different views, and to see how much more we have in common, and to connect over that, because that's actually much more rooted in reality, that we have so much more in common, and that we all want to be happy and to be peaceful and to continue to challenge all of our misconceptions so that we can really understand reality and our commonality and our interdependence, so that we can help make this world a better place.